So you know I like to start with a song, and it's always somebody else's perfectly good song that I've rewritten. Thank you, Linda Ronstadt, and the author. This is called Nature's Lament and Victory. I may not lead a simple life, complexity I own. If you can't give me honest heart, I'll manage with alone. I'm very used to being sad, it doesn't make me cry. And yes, I will yet still survive past those who live a lie. I am exactly what I am, and not the way you want for me to be. I care for you long as I can. Then I close my eyes and watch my world unfold before me. All right. Thank you for this opportunity to co-create with you and many more a new/old civilization. We are all on the design side, and here's how I hope to tee that up. I'm going to broadcast, which is an agricultural term, some seeds to provoke collective creation. You will see how we visualize our respective contributions by slides, and we look forward to seeing your questions at the end and your ideas over time. You will then hear from 4 great collaborators. After suggesting some synergies, we look forward to an open conversation with you for the last 20 minutes. We aim to co-create. If you cannot stay for that duration, please find a way to get us your questions and insights by writing them to us or leaving them in the lobby. So, tyranny, which has afflicted many population groups for centuries, is becoming a one-size-fits-all threat reaching everyone, everywhere, as well as our earthly home. In his treatise on tyranny, Timothy Snyder offers that among the 20 lessons we should observe is that we respect institutions throughout that threat. But which institutions should we respect, and which should we reform or even transcend? Today, with a solutions-oriented commitment, we suggest those institutions to reform and transcend include our economy and our civilization, which in the main are not now committed to sharing power or wealth or value or benefit with all, nor are they respecting nature upon which we all depend. We wish to exercise offerings for some proactive ways to transform our economy and therefore our civilization, especially as politics, governance, and philanthropy suffer seemingly complete breakdowns. We need a transformation. Incremental change would not have sufficed anyway, and we don't want to waste this crisis. So look for the cracks. That's where the light gets in, according to Leonard Cohen. A new old economy is a way to transcend the bankruptcy of our current systems. Status quo capitalism cannot be prologue because it has been entrenched and compounds the shortcomings of it. Mostly, capital has been beating up on labor and the means of production for centuries. It seems long overdue to give power back to be shared collectively instead of exploited for personal gain. I take on faith that we won't heal the planet until we restore justice, and we won't restore justice until we heal the planet. We might need all of us to join the underground to follow the freedom practices of those already in global fugitivity. So we look especially to the frontline and Indigenous communities for our help and guidance. Oh, maybe, there we go. On the way, we take stock of some of the harm and hallmarks of unbridled capitalism. Scale has been achieved with pernicious results. We suffer from a reductionist, extractive mindset versus a regenerative, holistic one, consolidation that embeds disparity and fosters corruption, centralization producing multiple and devastating single points of fail, commodification that leaves out and destroys the value of diversity and uniqueness. financialization of everything, especially that which should be stewarded as commons, monetization and pricing of the priceless versus authentic value exchange, human consumption and economic growth as unsustainable mandates, a GDP of disposables, packaging, and externalities that may well exceed the GDP of value, over-rewarding selfish activities that then become oversupplied, and underpaying and therefore undersupplying the helping economy, those human and environmental care activities, public goods, nonprofit work, etc. Whoops. Back. Is it going back? Maybe I missed one. Oh, no, good. Sorry. Even while we wrestle with the extant economy, as many here are valiantly trying to manage, localizing, decentralizing, democratizing, our earnest reform efforts may fail to solve for a regenerative holding outcome in time. Ecological system services may be an unnatural notion because nature doesn't only serve us. We may suffer a failure to recognize holistic impact when in nature you can never do just one thing. We may elevate marginal benefit over a no harm first commitment. And we may trade one set of problems for another, like lowering atmospheric carbon through unsustainable mining of polluting rare and conflict minerals and metals. We may endure unnecessary competition of ideas, resources, and sectors when we need collaboration, and we may over-dedicate time and resources to incremental versus systems change. So here are some core touch points that I keep in mind as we have this conversation. Today you will hear from some of the proponents of what I'll call paradigm return and why I've been using the, quote, new old construct. This is a back to the future strategy that deeply ensconces the ways and mores of the longest standing peoples of the last 50,000 years of human civilization to rebuild an old new civilization built for purpose for these times. I think we are suggesting a transformation based on and testing some core beliefs that might include that we respect the belief systems and cultural norms of those longest standing peoples, where we live in balance and observance of the laws of nature, not just the experiments of the last 5,000 years. That we create economies and civilization based on mutualism, where we do better together than apart, where no one has to know it all or do it all, where competition is not the driver of evolution, adaptation and diversity are, where we achieve full collaboration. There's no limit to the good that can be done as long as nobody cares who gets the credit. A mutualism that supports an egg strategy, the all for the all, versus a sperm strategy, the one against the all, which is not a genderist accusation since any gender can and does choose the egg strategy. An economy mimicking ecologies as a livelihood system. Jane Jacobs reminds us that economy means management of the home. An economy that fosters decentralized, autonomous, triple bottom line businesses and organizations collectively held in trust that steward our natural commons. An economy sharing power and responsibility with everyone and adoring nature. We might get into platform cooperatives based on network effects. We might explore community-based digital platforms, we will explore community-based digital platforms, knowledge archives, and other assets that are collectively created and held. When everyone owns a little bit of everything and no one has rights or owns too much of anything, we just might come round right. So our panelists have been asked to enter the transformative possibilities for our economy and civilization through a regenerative agriculture lens. Our ecological commons and civilization are network effects that we only steward, never really own together. All wilderness-based production systems and cultivation systems are the only sustaining ones. They are utilities collectively owned, and they need to be fed and cared for mutualistically. Photosynthesis in concert with healthy soils may be our ultimate alchemy. And even though we eschew intersexual analyses and approaches, soils are our best and ultimate unlimited carbon sink. The more carbon soils absorb, the more soil there is to absorb more and more carbon. With just 5 regenerative practices across all of U.S. acreage, we could take ag steeply negative and resequestering more and more every year thereafter. So without any further pronouncements by me, I'm going to allow the panelists, ask them to introduce themselves and take it away. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Wonderful. So my name is Seneca Edwards Heron, and I am the founder and executive director of Freedman Heirs Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization that supports Black farmers across the United States. And we have a tagline that says we are connecting Black farmers. We're bridging the gap between two worlds, Black farmers and the marketplace. At Freedman Heirs, our core pillars and core competencies are around trust. And not only do we exercise that with the producers that we work with, also with our partners and industry stakeholders. Trust stands for transparency, respect, understanding, support, and transformation. Couple of fun facts about me. I am an ag economist by training, and I've been working in the field of agriculture for 20 years now. I started out in academia, I moved on to the private sector, and I even spent 8 years at USDA in the office of the chief economist as an agricultural economist. In 2022, I decided to move on to nonprofit space where I started leading Freedman Heirs Foundation. The overall objective of the presentation today is to touch on a couple of core opportunities for all of us to really think through. Number one is bringing awareness and education. The second one is understanding the current landscape, where we are now in agriculture, and how we can move to a more investment or regenerative space or paradigm, as Kat alluded to earlier. Thirdly, I would like to highlight some innovative opportunities, as well as some of my fellow colleagues on this panel will be talking about opportunities in utilizing technologies and different platforms, and that's going to be very instrumental in moving us from point A to point Z. Facilitating access to investments. What does that look like? How do we all work together collectively as opposed to continuing to work in the different silos that we sometimes find ourselves in? And lastly, to encourage engagement and discussion. This is a dialogue. We want to hear from you all, ask us questions, and we also want to learn more about what you see and how are the ways we can potentially move the needle. So currently, the U.S. agricultural landscape is very debt-oriented. According to USDA ERS, the farm debt is forecast up approximately 5% to a little less than $550 billion. That's for 2024. When you're thinking about agriculture in the sense of heavily debt-oriented, that brings in the idea around debt leading to financial instability. For the producers that I work with, this is even more so the case because they're not operating on very large landscapes. They're smallholder farmers who may not have the financial wherewithal of farmers that have multi-thousand acre farm operations. So there is a component of systemic inequities that are affecting those producers at a more high rate. So how do we shift from being heavily debt-oriented to a more investment-oriented paradigm? Number one is we have to think about different approaches. And when you're thinking about different approaches, innovation has to be a core piece into that work and looking at doing things differently. The benefits of moving from a high debt-oriented to investment paradigm is reduced financial risk. Alleviating the pressure off of some of the producers that don't have the ability to utilize the current system that's in place, specifically when we're talking about finances and resources and opportunities. And how can investments lead to a more sustainable and equitable agricultural practices? I've heard it a couple of times here today, and we're talking around justice and implementing justice versus sustainability. And I think that that's true. Making sure that that justice piece is core to the work of sustainability will yield instrumental benefits for generations to come. In moving from debt to investment, you have to think about stabilizing BIPOC producers. And this is data from USDA's Census of Agriculture, the most recent one. And I wanted to compare and contrast from 1920 to the most recent one, which was in 2022. For those that like to look at graphs, let's look at the graph. It's jaw-dropping. These are actual statistics. And as you can see, minority producers only are a fraction of the number of farmers in this United States of America. And then when you think of the land component of it, all minority producers, except for Black farmers, have increased their land from 1920 to 2022. Black farmers have decreased from 1920 to 2022. So what are some of the potential reasons? Historical context, if you're thinking about Native Americans, Indigenous peoples, their land was land theft, disposed from the land that was theirs. African Americans were brought to this country as enslaved individuals, and even after emancipation, they faced so much discrimination that it has almost wiped that one segment of farmers out. It's only about 41,000 Black farmers in the United States. That does not even fill up half of a quarter of the Washington Redskins football stadium, just to give you a comparison. And also thinking about migrant workers, what they have contributed to U.S. agriculture and the modern developments that we're talking about now. And I know that there's so much talk about regenerative agriculture, but we want to make sure we don't leave behind marginalized producers in this transition to regenerative agriculture, because with any transition, there are costs associated with it, and that's a major barrier. Here are a few barriers that have resulted in those jaw-dropping charts that you saw. Upfront infrastructure and technology costs are, for marginalized producers, those costs can mean whether or not you remain viable or not. They're more risk averse. Land tenure issues. Who owns the land? You may be working the land, but you don't own it. And so these are all things that we need to think through, specifically the market access piece. And lastly, I want to talk about a few implementing strategies to implement the transformative investment. And I really want to speak to collaborative efforts, meaning how can USDA, philanthropy, the private sector, ag industry work together collectively? What does that look like? On a sense of the land, what are some land mechanisms that can be utilized? Can we look at low interest loans or no interest loans, or looking towards forward contracting, helping producers lock in their price so that it shows a level of increase or stability in cash flow? Can we also think about long-term contracts? That is something that is very important when we're talking about land tenure, because if you only have a contract for 1 year and you're a producer and you're leasing it, you don't know where you're going to be the next year. So it's hard for you to make decisions so that you can transition but also remain economically viable. And so these are all opportunities for us to come together collectively. The government has provided some programming. However, what about if we looked at it from a different perspective of infusing capital from different sources that are not traditional, philanthropy, private sector, investor dollars, to help with some of these transitional costs? Also to help to create new mechanisms around how we deploy capital, whether that capital is patient as opposed to the current conventional, I want a return on my money now. That is not going to help us move the needle, and it's also not going to allow us to be equitable as we transition to, or as we move towards, a more regenerative agricultural sector. So in summary, I want to leave with you all before I transition to my colleague is that the transformation from debt to investment paradigm is crucial. It's something that we all should be thinking about because it affects us. Agriculture affects us all in every day of our lives. And utilizing these different techniques, whether it's forward contracting, collaborative efforts, infusing and deploying capital in untraditional ways, are always, we have to think innovatively in order for us to make sure that we are working towards a more equitable agricultural society. And my call to action for everyone in this room is to where you are now, you can make a difference. And so even if that means, working or reaching out to an organization that you haven't worked with before, but also let's think through how we can support initiatives that are equitable and not reductionist in nature and not extractive specifically for those producers that are marginalized. And I'll pass it over to my colleague, Sarah.
Thank you, Seneca. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Ortner. I'm a senior associate at the Milken Institute Center for Financial Markets and the program manager for our Community Infrastructure Center and 10,000 Communities Initiative. I'm thrilled to be here today to discuss the work that we're doing with the Community Infrastructure Center. Our vision is straightforward. We support the development of projects from inception to completion. We believe that in order to create and support the development of replicable infrastructure projects, we need to focus on the communities themselves and their needs and the gaps that they're experiencing in order to figure out what barriers there are preventing them from reaching shovel-ready status on their projects and be able to source those resources, bring them back to the communities, and allow them to move forward. Our theory of change revolves around the idea that supporting projects comprehensively from initial planning to full-scale implementation is what allows us to enhance community resilience and foster long-term economic growth. Infrastructure deployment isn't about building, it's about building sustainably and inclusively, considering all financing classes that ensure projects are replicable and scalable. No project is going to be financed by a single source, but rather requires many streams of revenue to build a blended capital stack that allows them to reach their shovel-ready status. Moving into the specifics, we can explore how our platform facilitates project success through robust capital stacks and innovative financing solutions. Digital tools are at the heart of what we do. These tools streamline the financing process, providing clarity and transparency for both project sponsors and providers. Beyond theory, we are actively developing use cases that demonstrate practical application through financing solutions. For instance, we discuss how the standardization of a series of use cases that allow the life cycle of a project to be quantified, determining exactly what stages need to be completed in the pre-development life cycle, how many activities they are going to have to move through in order to become shovel-ready, and determining exactly how much financing, time, and technical assistance they are going to need in order to achieve each of these activities and ensure that their project becomes shovel-ready at the end of it. In doing so, we are hoping to break down the barriers to access that a lot of underserved rural, tribal, and urban communities are currently experiencing in building their community infrastructure and climate resilience projects. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about partnerships as I'm discussing the Community Infrastructure Center platform, because the entire point of the platform is to form partnerships with communities and ensure that they're able to reach the technical assistance, the project development, the project financing, grant writing support that they need in order to move their projects forward. And just as these communities wouldn't be able to implement their projects without partnerships, we wouldn't be able to implement the platform without partnerships. We partner with an organization called Open Grants that has been able to scrape websites like grants.gov in order to pull in a database of over 10,000 grant opportunities to the platform. Each of these opportunities is indexed and then is able to be matched to a project. Just to talk a little bit about the life cycle of a project on the platform, we require a project sponsor or a community with an infrastructure or climate resilience project to input information about that project, where they are, what they're doing, what activities have been completed and need to be completed, what funding has been committed and still needs to be committed. And then from that information, we are able to generate a list of funding opportunities for them to search through and determine exactly what types of capital they would like to obtain. Once they're able to give us information about the types of grants they're interested in applying for, we're then able to match them up with private funding that we have on the platform as well. So those are going to be your CDFIs, your green banks, your impact capital, your philanthropy, that are able to plug in with the grants that the project is working to obtain in order to help build a blended capital stack. The next thing that we ask a project to complete on the platform is a project readiness assessment. This was integrated with a partner of ours, HRNA Advisors, who built out a detailed questionnaire about the types of activities that a project needs to complete during the pre-development life cycle. Once they fill out that questionnaire, they are generated a list of gaps that their project currently obtains. And once they see the list of gaps and what their focus needs to be on moving forward, we're then able to match them with technical assistance. So those technical assistance providers and the capital providers are able to then work directly with the project sponsor in order to provide funding and assistance to help move them forward. This collaborative approach prepares projects for full capital deployment, ensuring they meet all the necessary milestones in the pre-development cycle, whether securing initial funding, obtaining permits, navigating regulatory landscapes. The integrated support system empowers them to move forward confidently. Taking a closer look at our community, we see a vibrant ecosystem. We're currently nearing 1,000 organizations on the platform, and our breakdown is pretty robust. We have a thriving ecosystem of nonprofits, municipalities, project developers, and advisory firms, governmental agencies, all of whom are playing a pivotal role in offering technical assistance and strategic guidance to the projects that we have on the platform. This diversity fuels innovation, but also ensures that each project receives tailored support aligned with its unique needs and goals. By fostering collaboration among diverse stakeholders, we're creating synergies that amplify the impact of infrastructure investments. Our knowledge base is a cornerstone of the platform as well, housing over 1,000 articles that span from detailed case studies to data sets to templates, tools and resources, community trainings, and office hours. These articles are curated and continuously updated by industry experts that we house on the platform, ensuring that our community stays informed and empowered with the latest insights and best practices in infrastructure deployment. By sharing knowledge and lessons learned, we empower project sponsors and providers to make informed decisions at every stage of their project's development. This collective knowledge not only accelerates the project's timelines, but it enhances their overall success and sustainability. Central to our community engagement is also our member registry. As I mentioned earlier, we have nearly 1,000 organizations on the platform, and each of those organizations has multiple members who are actively involved in advancing infrastructure projects nationwide. Each registrant on our platform is matched with an average of 15 grants worth about $6 million apiece, totaling nearly 3,000 unique grants across various sectors and project types. This robust matching capability ensures that projects find the funding that they need and the technical assistance that they need to progress from planning to implementation seamlessly. Our member registry serves as a dynamic hub where project sponsors and providers are able to connect, collaborate, and share resources, further strengthening the collective impact of the community's development. And then the last component of the platform that is one of my favorites to talk about is our community feature. Our community feature is used in two different ways depending on your user type on the platform. Project sponsors are able to use the community feature as a LinkedIn type networking tool. They can join channels or groups that are place-based, project-based, or program-based in order to access resources, ask questions, and connect directly with experts in each of their different project types. Providers, on the other hand, are able to use the community feature as a portfolio management tool. So they can deploy resources, promote upcoming events, and facilitate discussions among their entire portfolio of projects that they're working with. Another aspect that I would love to talk about as we talk about community building on the platform is our 10,000 Communities initiative. Hand in hand with the Community Infrastructure Center, our 10,000 Communities initiative is the outreach arm of the work that we do. We take a regional approach to accessing communities and having conversations about gaps that exist in each region of the country. And in order to do so, we visit each region, host an event where we bring together project sponsors and providers, typically community leaders and project funders, who are able to have an open dialogue and discuss the types of gaps that they're currently experiencing on the ground in those regions. We walk away from those convenings with a new sense of what is happening in each region of the country, what type of infrastructure projects are needed, and what type of gaps need to be filled, in order to go have conversations with experts that have previously had experience in filling those gaps, discover what resources we might be able to bring back to those regions, and then get those resources ready to deploy. And just to wrap up kind of the conversation about the Community Infrastructure Center, reflecting on our platform's impact and directions, we're really proud to highlight a lot of the partnerships that we've had and the connections that we've made recently. A recent success has been a pilot project that we did with the Community Resilience Centers out of the Strategic Growth Council in California. We had conversations with the Strategic Growth Council on the CRC program that identified that their program was highly oversubscribed. So we formed a partnership with a company called Streamline Climate, and we were able to use their generative AI platform to rewrite unsuccessful applicants from the CRC program, their grant applications, to help them apply for community change grants. So since the completion of this pilot project, we've helped 4 communities in California apply for community change grants, and we're currently waiting to hear back on those results. So as I've said, partnerships are at the core of all of the work we do, whether it's with the communities we're working with or directly on the platform. So I'm so thrilled to be a part of this panel, and I'm going to pass it over to Caitlin to continue talking about technology and innovation in infrastructure and agriculture.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I'm Caitlin Archambault. I'm founder of Open Future Coalition, and I'm so happy to be here with you all today. At Open Future Coalition, we believe that solutions to many of the world's most pressing challenges are already here, that many of them have been here for thousands of years, and that the current biggest challenge that we face is not one of innovation, but of connecting, making visible, and resourcing those existing solutions. Primarily the incredible community-led efforts that are already well underway. And we support those efforts by bringing social, technical, and financial tools that are often reserved for enterprise into the grassroots. We work side by side with impact organizations in 60 countries to launch a digital platform called Open Impact. It combines process management, knowledge management, measurement, and funding tools to solve complex coordinative challenges and support peer-to-peer learning, ranging from coordinating large-scale ecological restoration efforts in the Amazon and the Andes, connecting smallholder farmers with one another with shared infrastructure and best practices, to coordinating aid in times of displacement. Now, through our Regional Resilience Fellowship Program, we're working alongside 15 bioregional efforts in 9 countries, ranging from the application of traditional ecological knowledge in grazing and fire mitigation practices to well-being-centered approaches to urban planning and development. Together, we're launching a living library of existing solutions that will support peer-to-peer learning and contextual scaling. We facilitate cross-sectoral convening, bringing together practitioners, researchers, policymakers, and funders across the areas of ecological restoration, food systems, community wellness, and the built environment, as well as what we call weaving functions, areas like governance, metrics, and finance. We also support community leaders in facilitating place-based mapping, visioning, planning, governance, and funding processes to support their own regional resilience. And to Kat's earlier point, we've all witnessed how decades of runaway scaling, atomization, and siloization have led to us at large, but I'd say the financial industry in particular, losing sight of context. At the same time, all over the world, we're witnessing examples where community members, businesses, and funders are working together to address the unique challenges and opportunities in their economies and ecologies with the granularity and acuity that this urgent time requires. So through Open Future Fund, we're modeling an approach to funding that we call contextual capital. It's optimizing across multiple forms of financial and non-financial capital, bridging public and private, as Seneca and Sarah just shared wonderful examples of, to meet the unique and self-determined needs of local communities where they are in the project lifecycle and support their long-term resilience. And everything that we do is through partnership and applied practice. And so today I'm going to bring you through some of the areas in which we've been working in the food system space in particular. The way that we work is we find particular challenges or use cases in a particular region or sector, support with the tools or additional development that's required to help solve that unique challenge, and then look at where we can generalize those solutions to be applied in other contexts, sectors, and regions. Over the last 2 years, we've worked with North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, which is the largest historically Black college in the US, to expand access, coordinate, and apply technical assistance to small farmers and agricultural producers. This is particularly essential because there's a 50% gap in funding between Black and tribal land-grant institutions in the US and other land-grant universities, due in part to the fact that funding is allocated based on what existing public and private funding has already been applied, measured, and reported in the previous year. And so we support Extension and their community partners to deliver, measure, and report the impacts of their work, helping them to grow the reach of a workforce that has been rapidly dwindling over the last decade and expand their future access to funding. Through these initial efforts, we realized there was an existing wealth of research that was not necessarily making its way to the ground. So we launched a peer-reviewed resource library to bridge research and practice. We're now using an AI assistant trained on hundreds of thousands of public resources to expand access to institutional knowledge by extension agents and community members alike, while using the types of questions that small farmers and ranchers are asking to inform the development of the next sets of programs and materials. Through these efforts, we also learned or became more clearly aware of the fact that right now there are 3 private dollars for every 1 public dollar in the public land-grant university system, which means that public funds tend to be more accessible to those who already have access to private resources, which is growing these disparities further over time. We launched the tools that I just shared by providing them as an in-kind contribution, which was used as a match to unlock additional resources for our shared efforts in this partnership. And so last year, we launched the Center for Regeneration with 20 private partners to model at scale the matching of public, private, and in-kind resources to pursue shared resourcing for collaborative projects. And we did this as a project of our nonprofit to act as a third-party contractual hub outside of any one organization or institution, so we could allow the tools that we build together to be far more widely accessible. So what's next? One project that we're particularly excited to embark upon is a partnership with the Association of Research Directors of 1890s to expand the work we're doing in North Carolina to a suite of data and knowledge sharing tools to be made accessible to extension agents working in support of transition to more regenerative practices, next through a pilot in North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia, and then expanding that footprint to all 19 historically Black colleges and universities in the US. We'll also be expanding a program that we've called Local Impact Capital. As we heard in some of our discussions yesterday, there's incredible federal grant programs that are already in place, but they often require private matches. And this limits who has access to these programs. At the same time, the USDA has some of the strongest loan guarantees available. So we developed a risk model to match private and in-kind resources with existing matching funds to unlock the full potential of these existing programs by facilitating an open RFP process with local CDFIs and other local funding institutions. We can help grow their reach within their existing pipelines and communities, while also providing institutional investors with the assurance they need of not allocating a single dollar unless it's been paired with an existing guarantee. And there's still a lot of work to be done here. Last year, we received an LOI for a $100 million pilot of this process. But because the guarantees are happening at the project level, which is often at a much lower size than these large institutional minimums, and not at the whole portfolio level, they still wanted us to secure and absorb the cost of private underwriting for this process, to simply reiterate existing public programs. Programs like these can be really powerful in driving more investors to co-locate their investments as well with existing public funds and pre-development. So I'm keen to continue to discuss that topic with you all. I know that came up in a number of different sessions yesterday. And by leveraging tools like recoverable grants to fill pre-development gaps in a way that's reimbursable at the time of investment, we can help some of these programs be more long-ranging and resilient over time. Our experience here has really underscored our need to resource and expand investment in the common tools and infrastructures and governance, knowledge sharing and resource sharing that supports all of these efforts. And so I'm really excited to hand this off to Jose and hear more about his work at Agricultural Platform Collective.
Join the coalition. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. When we were preparing for this panel, we were talking about the order to go, and everybody just said, let the guy go last. So here I am, going last. My name is Jose Corona. I'm the Director of Agricultural Projects for OK Think, the Office of Kat Taylor. I was born in Michoacan, Mexico. So after watching that last video, I'm never eating avocados again. It's destroying my homeland. And I know I'm a California guy, so no more avocado toast for me. When I've known Kat for many years, and when they asked me to join the team to run the Agricultural Platform Collective, which is really focused on supporting small BIPOC farmers and ranchers starting in California to access markets, to increase their profitabilities so they can actually become sustainable, build wealth, and take care of themselves and their family. I immediately said yes. She was even asking me the question, we have this program called Agriculture, and I said yes. Why? Because this is a calling for me. My dad is a farmer. My dad grows strawberries in Watsonville, California. One of the best strawberries in the world come, especially in J&E farms. And so this was something that brings me back full circle. The work that we're doing, when I see the work of the APC, the thing that comes to my mind is my dad's face. Every day that I wake up to work is helping people like my dad and my mom become like my mom and my dad. And we have a long way to go. And Seneca did a beautiful job of highlighting the issues that prevent and the barriers that a lot of our BIPOC farmers and ranchers around the country are facing. And it's not getting better. But I think we have a room full of people that, as Kat said, if we work collectively, we can get it done. So where do we start? Back in, everybody remembers March 2020, when the world shut down. What didn't shut down was farmers and ranchers still doing what they do, which is produce their food, and that's their livelihood. Unfortunately, what shut down was actually the supply chain, the markets. Everything, the restaurants, institutional buyers, school districts, everyone where the produce went, that supply chain shut down. So that's how I got reconnected back with Kat and the team. Was I was working with Seven Aisha Curry's foundation, which part of the work is supporting and addressing food insecurity. In our hometown of Oakland, a lot of kids were going hungry. So to credit the Oakland, the Office of Cal Taylor and Kat and the team, they just said, how can we help? How can we use our platform to bring and make sure that the produce, one, does not go to waste, but it reaches the communities that actually need to be fed. So they launched an initiative called Growing the Table that was in 22, it worked with 22 hubs across 25 of California's counties. It delivered over 100,000 pounds of boxes of produce and 70,000 meals, engaged 128 different partners to distribute the food, and more importantly, it really supported 452 BIPOC farmers in California so that their produce, their livelihoods did not go to waste. So this meant that producers should and needed to be producing, but we needed to have a market for them. So when we started to sunset the initiative in 2022, and I say sunset because the pandemic's really not over, we asked farmers, and farmers came to us and said, yeah, you can't stop this because it was really helpful to us. What you did really saved our farms, our productions, our ranches. But what we know is that what COVID didn't cause a lot of the financial issues of what the farmers and other businesses were facing. It just revealed them, especially for BIPOC farmers. And what we know is that farmers are still in financial crisis.
Yes.
So when they said, we need you to continue doing this, we asked them, and we actually said, what can we do? And this is what they said. So we, through charrettes across the state, bringing farmers together, bringing organizations that work with farmers and ranchers, we asked, and we wanted to be guided by the voice of farmers and ranchers to continue the rest of the work, which is evolved into what the APC is now. And this is what they said, and they told us, we need sales channels. We're still not accessing markets. We're still being left behind. We're still forgotten. We're still not being seen. As Lauren said beautifully in the earlier panel, these BIPOC farmers are still not being seen. We talked about pricing, not only aggregation, but consistent pricing and equitable pricing. So they need support with that. They need everything from other seed, tool, equipment sharing, because a lot of small farmers can't afford that. So can we create platforms where they can actually share with each other? And access to long-term leases and land. You know, we talk about regenerative agriculture, and it is part of our mission to help farmers transition to regenerative practices. But they're not going to invest in that if, as Seneca said, they're on a year-to-year lease. Why invest in the land if you don't know if that land's going to be yours next year? So we have to really work on not only the long-term access of land, but the ownership of it as well. And they told us we want to learn from each other too. We want to connect with other farmers because that's how we connect. They wanted to build that community. This is Kat's brain. So when we took all that information and we took everything that we absorbed, that we heard in the charrettes, we said there's something needs to be done. We've got to start with farmers, but we got to make sure that it reaches their families, that it builds wealth and assets and addresses other areas of their livelihoods. They told us they want help with things like crop insurance, life insurance for their family, health insurance. They didn't want handouts. They just want to be able to afford it. So the work starts with the farmers, but it really is a long-term strategy around creating systems change. So, because everything is integrated. So we started with a bold vision, but again, this is taking on the world. So we got to start, wrong way. We had to start with pragmatic approach. Again, you know, we talked about that big vision earlier, but what they told us, we asked them, we went in the Central Valley now where we're working, they didn't talk about these big ideas. They said, you know what, I need a reefer truck that can take the produce that I have in Fresno, where it's 112 degrees every day right now, and if I leave it out for 20 minutes, it's going to go to waste. So I need a place where I can actually store it, have cold storage, and then the packing facility that will actually have short-term storage, and then go to wherever it's going to go, right? So very pragmatic things, cold storage, refrigeration, but they also need a technical assistance, which we're figuring out how to coordinate that. There's providers out there, but it's not well coordinated. Same thing with regional food hubs. There's food hubs out there, but they all don't work together and they all don't reach the small BIPOC farmers. And we wanted to think, whatever we're creating with the APC, we know, and our mission is that it actually benefits the farmers and ranchers. So with the structure, it has to be a collective, a cooperative, across the supply chain, whether it's on the reefer trucks, on the transportation, on the cold storage, every piece of that chain. Our goal is that it's farmer-led, farmer-informed, but also farmer-owned, so that there's no middleman out there taking a cut that takes the cut out of the farmer. So every piece of the supply chain that we're working on, our goal is that it's farmer-owned. So everything that we do is always guided by the voice of our ranchers and farmers. So what's next? And for us, when we talked with the Charrettes, they told us, if you're going to figure this out, you got to start in the Central Valley. So this is not an area where we went to address because we think that that's where we want to start. Again, we were guided by the farmers, said, if you're going to figure it out in the Central Valley. Why? Because there's not a lot of resources there. The Central Valley represents only 1% of the farmland in the United States, but produces 25% of fruits and vegetables that you eat every day. So big opportunity there. The other part of it is that it's about, a lot of big agriculture region, 7,000 BIPOC farmers. So there's a need there. And we also know, and I've been in conversations, I've been in convenings, where there's a lot of attention being paid right now in the Central Valley. Why? There's private equity and an eye into the land, but they don't want it for agriculture. They want a return out of it. And they're calling the Central Valley not a invested or a community of need. They use words as underleveraged. So whenever I hear that, I know the intentions are not right. So we got to work fast. So I know our strategy is crawl, walk, and then run, but we've got to get there really, really fast. And the last thing I'll say about the Central Valley is that it's a community that has a wide diversity, not only of representation, but even of thought. So we got to make sure that we enter there and become part of the community in a really authentic way. And we immerse ourselves and understand the whole scope of the Central Valley, not just the BIPOC community, but the entire community of the Central Valley. Because we're in a mission to save it. And our return, and I was on a hike earlier this year with a gentleman from New Zealand, Zev, who said, the only return that we're seeking is that butterflies come back. That's what we're seeking in that land. We're not doing it for financial reasons. We're actually doing it because we want harmony, right? And if our BIPOC farmers live in harmony, they can contribute to a more harmonious world. So that's our strategy. And that's why we're doing the work that we're doing, and we're going to do it without you. And I'll be remiss if I don't call out my team or the OK Think team. They all contributed to this, so thank you all. And even the timer, she's going to tell me to stop. Thank you.
So I just want to do a time check. We have until, because we were a little bit late starting. Anyway, we'll figure that out. 5 minutes. Oh, me. I'm going to cede my 5 minutes. I'm going to read a list of some provocative concepts and assets. But we really want to hear from you about how you feel about all this. So here's the list. Network effects and digital platforms, archival and retrieval knowledge bases, stewardship of our ecological commons, unscaling of decentralized autonomous organizations, an overlap map and diversified project finance, crowdfunding as aligned finance, constellated platform cooperatives, democratized ownership, gaming as advanced scenario planning, gaming as crowdsourced storytelling, narrative and cultural shift. But the floor is open. Let's hear what you have to say. I could talk forever about platform cooperatives and gaming. So see me afterwards if you want to obsess with me. And I think we have microphones running around.
Yep.
And we can't see actually whether you're, but maybe I'll.
There's a question way
Great.
up there.
Yeah, so I'm really pleased to hear you all thinking about this kind of democratized platform for funding the energy transition. I mean, we at Climatize this year were members of the Keeling Curve Prize and have been able to mobilize about $5 million of funding to clean energy projects through that kind of democratized channel, in particular actually to the REAP grants through the USDA in a way that actually has provided free solar and renewable energy projects to smallholder farmers in particular. And so I'm curious kind of your thinking about how we can scale this, above and beyond the U.S., but globally in a way that can enable, everybody to participate in funding the energy transition.
So I have a pet answer for that, and then others. So I think the word scaling is a qualified word for me, that it has to be done in a decentralized, autonomous, constellated way. Like as soon as we consolidate, we get a lot of corruption and a lot of single points of failure. So in the small community where Tomcat Ranch is, Pescadero, we suffered 6 days of power outage from one atmospheric river storm, and PG&E, the utility, claimed they didn't know it. Very expensive, because that means you can't pump, you can't keep frozen product whole, et cetera. And it inspired in us as a crisis the notion that we should own our own power and water utility, that it should be a microgrid and a micro utility that's collectively owned in town and does not suffer the single point of failure for the Christmas tree lights go out because one light went out. So we're busily working with local politicians and experts on that about how to create that utility. And it is a collaboration because the wealthy people in town have excess solar and wind power that they could feed onto the grid. And it's coming at a time when the utilities, consolidated, gamed the rates in California. So we went to 30 to 40 cents to pull off a kilowatt, but 30 to 40 cents to put on a kilowatt, to 40 to 40 cents to pull off, 3 cents to put on. It also suggests that batteries are going to be really essential for community resiliency, the avoidance of consolidation and corruption, and because the utilities aren't going to give us a fair rate for the power generated. And those batteries have to be water-based, non-volatile, no conflict metals, no precious metals, no ripping up the seafloors or the tundra for anything like that. And they have to scale down to community size, even though they may be operating right now in the county of San Diego. But anybody about, and I do see the energy and food system as the same. I don't know why we separate them. But.
I'll jump in a little bit to repeat myself a little bit. I think the answer is context, context, context. And so I think that there can be useful lessons from what's emerging in the US. And as we look through a global lens, I think it's really critical that we don't absorb that impulse to rubber stamp or kind of copy paste our way towards scaling, towards resilience. That's not how nature works. And so one approach that we've been really careful to take here is looking at how we can start to templatize and model financial solutions, other solutions that are happening in places like the US, and then make those accessible to folks in other regions who might be facing similar challenges, but ensuring that first we're really investing the time in mapping and identifying really the nuances of that local landscape and seeing what needs to be adopted so it can be applied within those particular contexts.
I also think that sorry, can you guys hear me? Yeah. I also think that it's important. I know you mentioned that you were also, working with smallholder farmers, but I think it's important that we allow time to see how and what these impacts are with smallholder farmers, because even when you're looking at it from a regional perspective, what may work in the West, the Southwest, may not necessarily have the same impacts for farmers or smallholder farmers in the South. And so also taking the time to gather data and impacts on a regional basis, as well as demographic basis, socioeconomic basis, before we start to move forward into thinking about the global impact of it.
Also, I can jump in here and just kind of echo what everyone else has said already about a decentralized bottom-up approach and a replicable model within the context of the region that these projects are occurring in. But then again, at risk of sounding like a broken record, public-private partnerships as well. No project, no movement, nothing really at this point is going to be funded by one single financing source, and it is going to take a model where the federal government and grants that projects are applying for, and then private funding as well, are working together in order to get these projects to a point where they are replicable and able to be sustainably financed, not only across the country, but then globally as well.
In fact, the GGR, the Golden Gate Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund mandate those awards came to coalitions of applicants, and it has to be levered 7-to-1 with private capital, which is appropriate because that's a government subsidy. It's catalytic capital for the just transition. I was going to say also that I feel like life is one big project finance conundrum right now because we're switching over major systems from one model to a regenerative one. So, yeah. So I have been wanting, and we can do this really easily now, to map out the capital assets, the labor base, the transportation systems of the non-renewable energies, non-renewable everything systems, and then overlay on top of that the needs of our renewable economy and see what can be repositioned, repurposed, and so on. Because we can't afford to rebuild the entire planet of the built environment. It would be climate-wise very expensive and resource and time-wise impossible. But I feel like project finance, we've talked a lot about, and forward contracting as sort of a form of project finance for individual producers. If they can sell first, they can plant second and innovate third. I'm looking. Eliza's probably looking.
I was so interested to see what you said with what happened with your growing table project, because I'm glad to hear you all talking about localized solutions, because decentralization, as far as I'm concerned, like every environmental problem could benefit from decentralization. So I'm curious if you can speak a little bit more about what you took from that particular program that could be added to like future solutions.
Do you want to take the first crack, or do you want to?
Well, yeah, but then Jose's sort of managing the afterglow of growing the table, and it was an effort to reveal the insights of frailties in the industrial system and opportunities for a regenerative one. And I think there were 32 pilots, something like that, in 28 counties. Every context was super different, but there were learnings across each of the pilots, and the peer-to-peer connection was very, very helpful and critical. So that's, I think, where we started thinking about a platform cooperative, which you could call civilization a platform cooperative. It's the idea that a network effect encourages members to join because the value to the membership increases with every member who joins, and they all engage in what's called social production, value creation on the platform, and they should get compensated for it. So either a micro share of equity or a value exchange of recognized mutual benefit, those sorts of things. And that those platform cooperatives, if they're constellated, are super resilient because they're decentralized, because they're context respectful, and because they're autonomous. So nobody can sort of take over and be the bully. But you have more insights probably about growing the table.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is that I think Seneca mentioned it, which was what works in what worked in the Central Valley will not be the same as the Central Coast or as Northern California or in LA. So the approach has to be regional. The learnings were regional. So as we think of scale, scale is relative, and that's how we're looking at it. And the other part is that we're starting, as we say, on an analog basis. We're letting the needs, the of the farmers and our business model drive the technology that we need. So we're building, there's technology solutions, so we're not starting with technology. We're letting the needs of the farmer, whatever they need, if technology is a solution, great, we'll pursue that. But again, like I said, there's other pragmatic, very analog things that they need. But their learnings is just very much that it's and what happens in California is very different in Idaho. So if we're really thinking at scale and even globally, you just really have to approach the solution from a regional perspective.
I would just add also that you saw the concentric circles of benefit. So the food system and food sovereignty touches every single societal issue that I can think of. And that means it creates the broadest coalition possible. So Healthy School Meals for All, which was passed first, the permanent funding for it in California, of course it involved food, ag, and education, but the coalition was much broader than that. It was labor, healthcare, climate, economy, environment, everything. And the coalition recognized if they went together to get that, they would all benefit. If they went alone on their single issue, they wouldn't get anything. 8 other states have now passed it, 25 are on their way. That starts to become a national mandate for universal free breakfast and meals for all. It's also a big buyer strategy, so aligning our public procurement dollars with our values can flip systems quite quickly. So we did it because it was the morally right thing to do for children, to be a lifelong trajectory of health and educational readiness and empowerment. But we also did it as a big demand trigger to the supply chain to shift it in favor of ecological, environmental, and racial justice. And there's many other systems that could provide that provocation as well. So.
Hi, and thank you all for your work in making these platforms available beyond even your own regions. That's a total dream from Idaho. I'm curious, 2 questions, kind of unrelated, but I'm sure one of you can touch on both of them. Is there a common goal on these platforms that kind of draws everyone in that you're defining? And if so, how do you find that common goal and put words to it? And secondly, what is the definition or nuance of how you all are defining replicable? I know there's been some conversations in the room about catalytic capital, and our experience on the ground has been that fit for purpose is kind of where we're at right now, because you're working with a producer that typically has a different background or skill set and is working in a different ecological context that is exponentially changing due to small or large water cycle collapse.
I can go ahead and start. At least speaking for the Community Infrastructure Center, our goal is to support communities, specifically rural, tribal, underserved, unserved, and urban communities across the country, though we do work with every type of community, in achieving a shovel-ready status on their projects. And at first, when we were designing the platform, we were having a series of conversations with different agencies, different communities, different types of nonprofits and companies across the country to figure out what exactly was preventing projects from becoming shovel-ready. And that was pre-development funding. That was the largest gap that we found. So our goal is to connect communities with the funding that they need in order to obtain the services that they require to become shovel-ready on their projects. And in order to get people on the platform, that's exactly what we do. We have conversations with intermediary partners that have a large portfolio of either communities with projects or providers that are providing services and funding to those communities, have conversations about them, about the type of connections that we're making on the platform, and then teach them how to use the platform and how to use the tools that we have available to them. So that's kind of how the CIC is operating and our goal of moving forward and getting these projects to the shovel-ready status.
I'll give it a try. we haven't talked about what the common goal is. I know that we all like each other, and we want to explore how to work together. But I would say that if I would venture to say, I can't speak for you, but I would say that we have in common that we're putting the farmer and rancher first, and everything that we do grows out of that. And I love that someone like Seneca actually goes deeper than that and very intentional and unapologetic of saying it's not only a farmer, but it's a black farmer. Not BIPOC farmers, but a black farmer. And I love that there's that intentionality. So I think as we build our platforms, we have to be intentional on how we build them and for whom. Like, who does it benefit? And I think we always have to be reminded of that. And I think we ask that question about who's going to benefit from what you're building, from what you're building. I think we got to ask that. And I think we have that in common, that we have to keep whoever we're serving first and let that guide us.
And I think the common vein for all of us, I'm going to try to speak for all of us, is equity is at the center of it.
Yeah.
And without having equity at the center of transitional movements of which we are all talking about, even creating a platform, all you're doing now is creating another system that's pretty much a mirror of the old system with a new name. And so what we are all trying to do is make sure that we are giving a voice, a platform, and resources to marginalized producers, specifically producers in this country who have had to endure systemic racism, land dispossession, denied access to markets, denied access to capital. All of these things together has created a negative externality that we don't always talk about. But the work that we're doing, even though it's different, collectively, the work is to help and to move that needle.
Amen. I sometimes think too that thriving is at the heart of it all, because we have such a deficit model of our economy that, people just deserve to survive at best, almost sometimes at best. And that this is supporting life, but all forms of life at their highest and best actualization.
I'll jump in further and first echoing everything that Seneca just said. I think that was a beautiful way to share that common intent. And I'll speak a little bit to your second question as well. But first on the common goal piece, I'll add, which is very similar to what the others here shared, but I'd say through the lens of Open Future Coalition, what folks have in common that are leveraging our tools is that they are personally grappling with a particular challenge in their local community, and they're looking for the best tools that they can access to solve that, where they are with what they have. And then beyond that, I would say through a network lens, the attractor beyond that has been one another. I remember the first time, almost 4 years ago, that we were convening farmers with one another. I logged into LinkedIn and I had a message from someone from Zimbabwe. And he said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to message you. I live usually 2 days from the nearest place that I can get into my LinkedIn account. But I heard you're convening farmers." I had no idea how he'd even found out. But we've witnessed time and time again, I think, this thirst for knowledge sharing, saying hey, I'm dealing with this challenge. Are you dealing with something similar? What did you do? And then to your point around the scaling, it absolutely needs to be fit for that place. And I would say that the way that we're looking at knowledge, best practice sharing, templatization, scaling is absolutely through sort of the humble lens of supporting folks and self-documenting. That's what we're doing right now with our living library. Here's what I did, here where I am. This is what worked for me, and this is how it turned out. If anyone else wants to take that template and go and apply it where they are, it's not going to be 100% contextually relevant to be copied and pasted. It's going to have to be adapted for ecological and cultural context. But hey, maybe if I can start at 85%, because someone already solved some of the hard questions that I'm grappling with, then I'm starting there instead of at 0, and I can really focus on that other 15. And so I hope that helps to clarify some of the ways in which we're thinking when we say kind of templatization and scaling.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So I look at everything really through a plastic pollution lens, and I want to say two things. One, that I totally commend all of you for the work that you're doing, creating foundations, coalitions, and collectives, because I believe in collaboration and radical collaboration, and I think that's really key. But at the same time, I'm wondering if anybody on stage would talk to whether they're looking at that when it comes to justice and equity, the plastic, fossil fuel plastic connection, and that overlay in the work that you're doing. Kat and I have talked about it in the past with delivery systems for food and in agriculture, and I'm just wondering if you are considering that in any of the work that you're doing right now.
I can say I think we started to have that conversation earlier today, but currently where we are in Freedman Heirs Foundation, we haven't looked at it specifically, but I definitely think that is something of importance. So I was at Innovation Forum in May, and I was actually on the panel moderating the session, and so I had the opportunity to talk and engage with people more about, okay, exactly, walk me through this process or this thought process. And so it has given me the opportunity to do a little bit more research and dive a little bit more deeper into the problems of plastics and packaging. But as we are right now an organization that's not been integrated in our work, but it's not to say that it won't be.
Thank you.
And I think that's the effort to reform the entire economy, is to get at what are the dynamics that allow plastics and single-use products to be so dominant in our economy, and how we can drive them out. It's also a coalition issue, as you know very well. Agriculture is one of the, industrial ag is one of the strongest lobbies, maybe only outmatched by financial services, because it's not just industrial ag, it's oil and gas, which is one of the biggest components of industrial ag. So to eliminate the political corruption so that we can have an economy that fairly prices externalities, for instance, that might be something I'm willing to price, although it's problematic too. But yeah, we're pretty keenly focused on that. And the toxicity that plastics are leaving behind, which is a human scale crisis at this point. There's, let's see, anyone else?
That's it. Oh, right here.
Hi, thank you all. This has been a very enlightening panel for me. It's not my area of expertise at all. I'm a creative and a storyteller and a filmmaker, and I'm really interested both from this specific sector and then this sort of global, worldwide systems. Especially you, Kat, you speak a lot to narrative shifts and storytelling. How are you envisioning this story being told and shared to the world?
We should put Shannon on the stage a lot. As you know, I'm super interested in the Gaming for Good community for not just shifting the narrative and creating very compelling storytelling or resurrecting very compelling storytelling, but also what happens when the narrative is created by everybody instead of just a few powerful interests? And I think there are a lot of creative acts in society that create narrative paradigm shift, et cetera. So it's not just media, although we're very involved in media, as you know. But so, for instance, we're invested with Ford Foundation and Eline Media in an impact investing game. What happens if everybody has capital to invest for impact? What would they do? What will they find out it has done for them and the planet and their communities? And how can we do that in a frugal time frame and resource use to scenario plan sort of thing? But it's hard to beat the narrative of going back to the longest standing peoples who managed to survive 45,000 years when we're looking at like a pretty short rope here.
I'll just say from what we've heard that from the farmers that we talk to, they want their story to be told authentically. And what they mean by that is that, and we were talking about it earlier today, that we want everybody to see farmers as an asset. and at the level of any other profession, whether you're a lawyer, a finance expert, whatever, because sometimes farmers just say, oh, I'm just a farmer, or we all say, oh, they're just a farmer. We want it to be a story where they're an asset, not only to their community, but to the world, to the economy. So we want to put them in that pedestal. And we want to do it in a way where we don't do it for our benefit or for charitable benefit. You've seen all those stories, oh, for 10 cents a day, you can save a farmer. That's not the story that we want to tell.
Without the farmer, you don't have any.
No, but
So that's where the narrative has to change.
of course, and that's what I'm saying, is that we want the story to come from the farmers. Not how we view farmers, but how they view themselves and how they want to be seen. And how they want to be reflected in the narrative and the story. Because I think it's been said many times, stories change hearts and minds. We know that. But we don't want to create that content. It has to be their content that they own and the story that they want to tell about themselves.
We had a little lesson last night at dinner because there's some, farmer is a contentious word for some people because it is a term that was sort of rejiggered by colonial powers away from something might more broadly be considered land stewards. But it's hard, we sort of inherited this nomenclature, and it'll be a while before we can remind people that farmers are land stewards, and that's to whom we owe the most respect, in a sense, in the value chain of agriculture. But also there's Eline Media developed for and by something like 17 Inuit-based tribes in Alaska, a game called Never Alone that allowed them to put forward their origin story in a really compelling way. And they own the platform, they own the game, they're going to own any collateral that comes out of it. And it is, used by many, many, many millions of people are going there and relearning the stories that previously not only changed hearts and minds, but held them.
And I'll add to that around the storytelling. For a lot of producers that I work with, they want to tell their own story, even with the very difficult history that comes with being a Black producer in this country. And part of the reason Freedman Heirs Foundation was started was because, I think I forgot to mention this, but I'm a farm kid. I grew up on a farm in Mississippi. I'm 5th generation. And so in telling that story, we want it to be authentic, as Jose mentioned, but also, for Black farmers, they were invisible. When you Google farmers in the US, you have to go through like 7 pages before you see any diversity. And so it was almost an erasure of Black farmer contributions to this country. And if you think about the history of it, a lot of the crops that have become cash crops in this country were the direct, it was because Black people were taken from Africa, they were farming those crops there, they were brought here for their knowledge and their farming ability. Telling that story is what's important to the farmer, and also the contributions of African Americans to US agriculture. Without that, we wouldn't be at the place that we are, along with Indigenous knowledge. So acknowledging that on the forefront and not on the back end, I think is very important for storytelling. And there is a film called by Al Roker Entertainment. I don't know if everybody has seen it, but it is telling the story of Black farmers in this country. And it's very compelling, it's very emotional. But these farmers are folks that have gone through the fire, and they've been generationally here to tell their story. So I encourage everyone to please, it's gaining ground, the fight for Black land. Please check it out, look at it. It's a very compelling story. And my hope and desire is that we can see that for all ethnic groups, all minority groups in this country.
Also, check out Natalie Bazille's We Are Each Other's Harvest, which is being made into, and it's a compendium of great information about our history.
Is that Queen Sugar?
She wrote Queen Sugar, too, which is really fun.
I love that this is where we're kind of landing with this session today. I tend to say everything is a story, right? It's a story of rampant scaling and industrialization and that got us here. And I think it's a story about fundamentally redefining value that's going to get us to where we need to go. Money is a story, value is a story. I think the lucky position we're in here is that we have an opportunity to rewrite that together. And I'll say from a pragmatic sense, in working with impact organizations globally, one of the first things that they come to us with when we do a needs assessment is that, how they're sourcing their funding is based on how well they're able to tell their own stories. And so one of the biggest needs that we've heard from them are storytelling tools so that it can more effectively amplify their existing work. I'd say data is a story, and we're working on ways that we can invite more and more qualitative storytelling-led efforts in showcasing that. We recently added to our fellowship program an organization called Media for Change, so that we could pair our fellows with the tools to tell their stories and amplify them. And then from a sort of on-the-ground sense, we're more and more tuning into the need for storytelling as a process itself. So how do we sit with communities in a gathering of story as a way to map and surface existing needs and capabilities within those communities so that we can use that storytelling process itself to start to move forward shared kind of future visions at the community level and even make resource allocation decisions together.
And I just really quickly want to echo what Caitlin said, that data is a story, and that is one of our main focuses on the CIC, is collecting data and turning that into a replicable story that can be shared with communities that are able to look at how long it takes for a specific activity, how much funding it takes for a specific activity in order to move their projects forward. So that's something we're deeply focused on as well.
In Regenesis Institute, which is the organization that oversaw the parlaying of a $20,000 EPA grant into $300 million of capital investment into Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is one of the most beleaguered communities with 2 Superfund sites, 6 brownfields, sex trafficking, just horrible impacts on that community. They rebuilt according to a model of resist, so clean up the Superfund sites, reposition, get yourselves elected to everything in the state, including Harold Mitchell served 12 years on the state legislature. Reimagine, so a true community engagement process to reimagine and vision what you want your community to be, and then regenerate. And it's a really wonderful arc of story because it doesn't stop on surviving because you resisted something bad.
We're done.
I think we're out. Yeah, but I hope we can continue carrying on this conversation and learning more about everyone's efforts in the collective.